other things. A stone that only a righteous man could give away. Were all these things another ancient item that was only resurfacing now, drawn up from the deep? What was he doing here? Last time, the stone had fought him for possession of his own soul.
It's not personal, but your mother wears army boots on her ears.
The ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. And he hadn't come too late.
Yeah!
There had to be some way to use the Iblis stone. It was old, wasn't it? People are so much cleverer now. And Renato was pretty sure he was cleverer than most people. The ravens at least could not get past this point. Obviously the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. I can make you mighty. Who said that? It was the stone. Eager, thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and he had a sneaking suspicion the gem would try to control him. Why not capture the core of Skyripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. "It's the core," said the stone anxiously. But even though Renato knew how evil the gem was, he had a clever plan for dealing with it. The stone bothered him. He hated being told what to do. Wasn't that why he joined the rebellion? Wasn't that why he'd refused to be a soldier? He'd agreed to come on board only if he could freelance. The stone felt a bit clingy, and he had a feeling it did not have his best interests at heart. The sage Calaveras had told him where to find the Skyripper, a weapon capable of challenging the gods. Even without its armature, the core would still possess great power. He would go there. The moment he landed the Farfarer, Renato had a rare feeling of regret. It's not too late, he thought. He could turn around and sail for Zenovia's island. He frowned. Wait a minute. He didn't want to kill Zenobia, did he? Sure, technically she was the enemy, but they'd been at Sword Fu school together. They'd never been lovers, but somehow they'd been closer. She'd told him every secret about herself. Except the biggest one. That she was the Emperor's daughter. No. Whispered the stone. Before it's too late. He was in a swirl of newly remembered knowledge. He needed to focus. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. The stone hadn't lied about what it could do for him. With each raven he cut down, he felt a jolt of power flowing into his arm. "You're weak," whispered the stone. Are you afraid of it? No, don't be ridiculous. It chuckled. But it's unstable. It will poison you so much as carry it. And if you try to use it, it will explode catastrophically. Renato did not trust rocks that talked in his head. Don't go away. As he approached the core, the stone became hysterical. No, it's too much power. We'll rip a hole in space and time. He had a sudden vision of plunging his gauntlet into the core and dying in anguish. That wasn't his vision, was it? The stone had sent him its darkest fears, hadn't it? He had a sudden impulse to do exactly that. He raised his right fist and plunged it into the core. There was a rush of light. He thought he could hear the stone screaming. And then he passed out. When Renato came to, the core was gone. But the Iblis stone was no longer black, but glowing with a blue light. And it was silent. "I can't hear you," he sang out, and "Yoo-hoo!" It didn't answer. "Ha!" he said. He had defeated the demonic gem with the power of his mind. He felt invincible. It was time to attack the Imperial outpost on the Nexus. Take the battle to the enemy. But among the huge crystals, there was also an observatory. A wise man would probably ask the scientists exactly what he had first. How wise was he? As the Farfarer sailed towards the Nexus, Renato wondered if the core had been created to silence the stone, or even to feed its hunger. Well, honestly, he didn't care. He felt terrific, and he appreciated the quiet inside his head. The Nexus was infested with ravens, but that didn't bother Renato. With each death, the converted Iblis stone in his gauntlets glowed brighter, and he felt stronger. Wow. He was getting a bit bloodthirsty, wasn't he? Well, he wasn't worried. He was a warrior, as supposed to be. The core, absorbed in the stone, was doing its job perfectly. Renato could feel a little eldritch jolt every time he downed a raven, and then it flowed into the glowing stone the way water flows down a riverbed. It all felt perfectly natural, as if all his life, this was what he had been meant to do. Renato tore through the last remaining guards at the outpost like hot coffee through snow. There was a far speaker toad here. He called the council speaker. He knew she would be thrilled, and she was. She wanted him to come back to base. They had plans to disable Renato. "Let's talk about who else I can kill." Then the far speaker croaked again.
"Hello, Renato,"
he said.
"If you get sick of slaughtering second-rate birds in the Nexus, I'm waiting for you in the mountains."
Zenobia. She missed him. She loved him. Once she saw how awesome he'd become, maybe she'd join him. They'd kiss and... Well, if she did refuse for some reason, he was no match for him now. Zenobia was taunting him. No doubt she hoped to lure him into a trap. Well, he was nobody's sucker. Especially not hers. He carried victory in his gauntlet. He would go where the council pointed him. As he set foot on the island, Renato felt energized, like when he was hunting or dancing. Then he smelt it, the stench of ravens. It was a good thing he was here too, before they tripped over the secret base. He was really saving the council toad's bacon, so to speak. Why hadn't the kid opened the Book of Destinies? At least he'd have known about that goggler. Why hadn't Hypatia opened it? And this was kind of terrifying. What if they had? And what had happened had been the best future they could find. Renato had an artifact that made him practically a godlike warrior. All he had to do now was collect his medal, head for the Imperial fleet, and raise some hell. See? Renato was a hero of the revolution. He deserved a medal. Soon, he deserved every medal they had, and hopefully one big medal ceremony in front of everybody with trumpets so everyone could know what he'd accomplished. What's for dinner, he thought. Hope it's not broccoli. Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. Inside the rebel base, Renato was invited to the council speaker's private chambers.
So, this is the Iblis stone? He said. I can feel its power.
Renato told her how he had fed the core to the stone and made something even more useful than either.
Crazy like a fox,
she croaked. And Renato chuckled as if he'd never heard the joke before.
We've given you the best quarters and a bottle of Tantalonian firewater. All for you.
So they'd remembered. He woke in the morning with the sweetest of hangovers. But the Iblis stone was gone from his gauntlet. The corridors were empty, except for a few rebels who looked just as hungover as him. Come on, you'll miss the battle, they yelled. Renato added sail as the Farfarer scudded across the sky. Who could have taken the Iblis stone? Was it some Imperial spy? He would find him, and kill him, and take the stone back. Renato had a bad taste in his mouth. He was killing ravens, but it wasn't fun. It felt like a chore. Renato hated chores. As a fox kid, he'd gone hungry rather than clean his room. He still didn't clean his room, he just moved house every few years. Who had the Iblis stone anyway? Up ahead, he could hear screaming and croaking and cawing. But who was winning? There it was again. The back door to the portal that went to the center of the fleet. As he ran forward, Renato noticed that some ravens were starting to ignore him, just running away. Who were they running from? Some hero of the revolution? If some other so-called hero of the revolution had the stone and tried to take his victory and his medals, Renato was going to be seriously pissed off. He was the hero, not some other photo. Finally, Renato came to the Emperor's ship. Zenobia lay dead in front of it. The ship was a wreck. Ravens lay dead, sprawled everywhere. Bloody feathers spattered across the deck and the dock. The council speaker came out. She was waving a sword around like a flag. "Look at me, Renato!" she croaked. The Iblis stone on the sword was black as coal.
Now I will be Empress, and all shall tremble before me, she croaked.
So the stone had her. It was in her brain, whining for blood. I'm afraid I can't allow that, said Renato, and moved to fight her. Toads are not usually good with swords. Something about the footwork. And the council speaker was not even a warrior. She was always tripping over things, which is quite an impressive achievement when you're a toad. Yet somehow, she was pressing Renato backwards as he desperately tried to keep her sword away from his throat. Look, why don't you keep the stone? He asked. You deserve it.
Blood and souls for Iblis, she croaked. Blood and souls.
She got under his guard with her sword. It was just the tip. But sometimes just the tip is enough. He could feel his soul being sucked into the stone. As he died, he felt embarrassed more than anything else. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Renato finally realized that Lapino was a traitor to the cause, and maybe Renato could use that somehow. Ah, Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lapino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time. Lapino's frantic message said that the Ravens were going to kill him for being a rebel spy. And that he had a clever plan. If the fleet reached him first, they'd string him up for that. Never mind the winged horse. Or so Lapino had told him over the far speaker anyway. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen the winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? That was odd. Renato had been here, at this exact place, at this exact time. Lapino would betray him. But now Renato knew that. What would Lapino do if he knew that Lapino was going to betray him? Well, he'd concoct a crazy scheme, wouldn't he? Use Lapino's betrayal against him and it would blow up in his face. Yeah. Maybe he was overthinking this. Well, that would be a first. Dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Renato recognized the cards. It was Lapino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger.
I am. We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows. And that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who happened to also be a deadly sorcerer, and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. And it would be nice to see her. He'd always had a soft spot for her. And he felt sure she had one for him. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. To make the Sky Ripper, the Transcendent Emperor had wrapped an armature around the eye of a god. Renato had all... It's beautiful here, thought Renato. It was nice to be back with his old war buddy. All right. Lapino was a traitor. But still, it was good company. The waterfall was spectacular. We passed this way but once. Yeah, whatever. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. Renato felt wrong all over. He could feel an almost palpable sickness in the air. And if the land could have tumors, they would look like these monstrous crystals. The forest was quieter than it had been. There were insects, a few birds, if you didn't count the ravens. Renato smelled sick animals and dying ones. No healthy ones. And getting a bad feeling about this. Renato thought, maybe Lapino was right. Maybe they should have kidnapped Zenobia instead of coming here. As he held the radiant icosahedron, Renato felt queasy, like dozens of tiny worms were nibbling his insides. It wasn't help.
Tell you what, said Lapino. I'll take it to the observatory. You attack the Imperial outpost.
The Imperial outpost was a vital communications node. Taking it could shatter the Empire's ability to coordinate. And it would be full of secret plans and maps and maybe even rebel prisoners. It was a good target for a hero like Reynardo. But what if Lapino lost the core to the Empire? That could be a good thing, couldn't it? Was Reynardo ready to take that risk? Maybe it was better if he brought the core to the scientists himself. Lapino was a touchy rabbit. Reynardo knew that. You're brave, I know, Reynardo said. But this is what I was hired to do. Oh, well, at least let me run ahead and walk. As Reynardo watched Lapino vanish on the horizon, he could feel nausea building in him. He felt ill. Could his knees really be aching this much? But how could he have handed the core off to Lapino? That was a recipe for disaster. Reynardo felt worse. All his joints were aching now. He'd been through beatings that felt better than this. So the core had a kind of poison that could harm you without even touching you. That's new. Well, it had power. The rebellion needed something with power. And how was this any worse than a sword wound? Well, a death by sword was sudden and fair. This was just squalid. A piecemeal death, like old age. The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists everywhere. Reynardo found the mad rabbit cowering under a desk. The ravens, they must have known we were coming, said Lapino. How did you... Well, see, I was doing a card trick with my lucky deck, and I kind of bobbled the cards, so I went under the desk to gather them up, and boom! I guess we'll have to take the car straight to the secret base. Renato wasn't sure he believed that. But Lapita was talking so fast. It always seemed to make sense. The secret rebel base. Yes. They had engineers there. But wait. Calaveras, the sage in the mountains. Maybe he would know what to do with the naked core. Ah, yes. The secret base. Not even Lapino knew where it was. They had engineers there. Those toads would surely know what to do with the core's power. The ruins were quiet, but Renato could hear a buzzing in his ears. Was it bugs? Or was it the core slowly feeding him poison? The council would know what to do. If the core had this much power, it could surely change the terms of the great battle that was coming. And maybe they would take this burden from him. Maybe. Renato felt new powers, ready to blossom within him, or something. The Empire's chokehold was closing around the rebellion. The base was still secret for now, but for how long? They would have to make a move soon. The core. They had to find a way to use the core. How had it come to this? Renato had signed on as an adventurer. Sure, the Emperor had gone mad. Sure, Renato had heard horrors from the ghosts of dead kittens and puppies sacrificed in his blasphemous rituals. But when he jumped in, he'd only been a little bored and slightly broke. And here he was, carrying a bucket of death across a broken landscape. Why not drop it and run? Because he hated to quit in the middle. That was his fatal flaw. He had to know how it all turned out. The long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. He dropped the core at the entrance to the council chambers.
Get that thing out of here!
Croaked the speaker.
It's making us sick!
That's the core of the Sky Ripper, said Renato.
That's not useless at all,
Said an engineer toad.
it's poisonous. Look at the fox. He's ill, probably dying.
Yeah, not useless at all, said Renato. So what do I do? Rub it on His Majesty? The engineer chuckled. Renato didn't like it when engineers chuckled.
Oh, I got it. Listen,
I can make a bomb that spread bits of the core all over a circle about 100 paces wide. Yeah. Little chunks of poison and death. All you have to do is just get it near the Emperor. It'll kill him and his bodyguard and chop off the head of the fleet. Yeah, and if we're lucky, might poison some of the ravens around there as well.
What about me? Right, what about you? Well, I'll build in a timer. You can set it and run. No, that's a horrible idea, said Renato.
Well, we have to do something, yes?
Said the speaker.
This is something.
Renato couldn't argue with that.
And so, reluctantly, Renato loaded the rigged core onto the Farfarer and set sail towards the Emperor's ship. The rebels took the fight to the Imperial fleet, but Renato was too sick to enjoy the view. He must have passed out as a firm hand grabbed him and shoved him forward. This was it. The fleet seemed very big, and its ravens very tough. Or maybe he was just slower and weaker than before. He hated the idea of poisoning the enemy. It wasn't fair. Face to face with a raven, let the best swordsman survive. But they wouldn't even know what was killing them. Feather by feather, scale by scale. He didn't mind dying a hero. That sometimes went with being a hero. But he didn't feel at all like a hero. Not today. He was exhausted. He was making stupid mistakes. His fur was coming off in bunches. Up ahead, he could see the Emperor's ship, long and sleek, a floating palace. The bomb would only poison a circle 100 paces wide. He would get as close as he could, set it, and jump. Oh, this was a lousy way to win a rebellion, he thought. He didn't want a medal for this. Just wanted to be forgotten. Renato twisted the timer and the bomb as far as it would go and staggered off. His knees hurt. Oh, everything hurt. He staggered away as far as he could until he had to lie down. He could see the entire Imperial fleet from here and the rebel ships engaged with it. There was a blinding flash. And a second later, a monstrous thump. Burning rocks arced across the sky over both fleets. A wreath of fire shot outwards, rolling across the fleets. A pillar of smoke boiled up from where the Emperor's ship had been.
It reached into the clouds. That's a wee bit more than 100 paces, thought Renato. It took Renato most of that evening to die. Some of the toughest ravens lasted all week. Some of the rebels in the furthest ships survived as much as a month. That winter, with neither empire nor rebels to rule them, the islands slid into banditry. And so began the Second Age of Darkness. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer.
Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Renato finally realized that Lapino was a traitor to the cause, and maybe Renato could use that somehow. Renato couldn't quite put his paw on when he'd realized Lapino was working for the Empire. He'd never exactly seen Lapino sending coded messages to the palace, but he was sure. The rabbit had been on too many disastrous missions where he was the only survivor, or where he accidentally missed getting on the boat that went down to the abyss in flames. If Renato could prevent Lapino from getting back to the fleet with all the intelligence he'd probably gathered, it might be worth the trip. How had they come to this? They'd been on so many adventures together. Lapino had talked Renato out of prison at least 4 times, and Renato had rescued Lapino from at least 2 lynch mobs. Felt that the rabbit resented him. Lapino was hilarious because he was so down on himself and everyone else. But behind the laughs, he wasn't a happy camper. Ooh, was this payback?
Or did the Empire have his little white tail in a vice?
Personal space?
Ravens were landing everywhere from dropships. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lapino first, the rabbit would give the Empire all the intelligence he'd been stealing from the rebellion, and they'd probably give him a medal. He'd have to be very careful about how he played Lapino. At the slightest hint of danger, the mad rabbit would take off like a rabbit.
Lapino would betray him. The core was dangerous. Renato had a fleeting idea that the two ideas went together somehow. And then it was gone again. Damn ideas. They never stuck around when you needed them.
Bloody and exhausted, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing shuffling his favorite deck. Now that he knew what the rabbit was, there were a few things about him that Renato didn't find so amusing anymore. You sent me an urgent message saying that you're in danger. Oh, I am. The Ravens are coming. Now, I got a clever plan to kidnap Zenobia. Renato wanted to clap shackles on the rabbit and shout, "You're a traitor, and I'm not falling for it." But if there was one thing Renato was sure of, it was that the core of the Sky River was dangerous mostly to its user. If he could put it in the Emperor's hands, old Isengrim III might blow himself and his fleet up with it. Yes, that was it.